Hello guys, it's Miss Salceda, and I'm here to show y'all how to use the updated annotation guide to answer a sample DBQ question. So if you go to the AP Test Prep in Google Classroom, then you'll see that it's on here. Now, obviously I haven't sent it yet because it's almost 11 o'clock, but by tomorrow or today for you all, it will be up there. So Labor Union DBQ document that we are going to be using and the updated annotation guide are here. After this video is complete, I'm going to be adding the video. Obviously, it's not on here because I am not a time traveler, nor am I in Back to the Future. So once you do that, you're going to get the DBQ, which has been updated to reflect the changes for 2020, and the updated annotation guide. I went ahead and took the liberty of adding little places for y'all to type in, and one day maybe I'll tell you how I figured that out on my own. But we're going to be doing that. So again, you're going to have 5 documents where you summarize it, put an argument, and then point of view, audience, purpose, or context. And then, of course, where you're going to be putting your outside evidence, your context, and then your arguments. So we're going to be doing all of this today. So if you look at document 1, oh, I didn't even go over the question. To what extent were American labor unions successful from the time period 1866 to 1914? So you're going to be analyzing how effective were labor unions. So yes, they were affected, or no, they were not. So let's go ahead and look at the documents first. Now, this document 1 from 1886 Puck Magazine shows Terence Powderly. He was the leader of the Knights of Labor. And you can see him here. Let me move this a bit. You can see him here holding his arms open, and he is pushing back a scab. I don't know if y'all remember from lecture, anytime there was a strike and the workers refused to work, people would come in to replace them temporarily, a temporary fix. And they were called scabs because a scab is like holding your wound in place or whatever science words there. So here you can see from the document that the scab is being pushed aside because they're a threat. Now, obviously, if you remember from your readings, Terence Powderly only supported workers that were part of the Knights of Labor. If they were part of a different labor, let's say the American Federation of Labor, he did not support them. So if you go to the updated annotated guide, what is the document showing? Oh, this is big letters. Oops. I guess that's all that's going to fit. So once you have done that, the next box says, what is an argument that could be made? So an argument that you could make would be, this would probably be easier if we figured out what we're going to write first. So let me pause it real quick and then go back. Oh, can I even pause it? Oh, yes, here. You know what? It's too much trouble and I can't figure it out. So we're just going to continue. Okay, now the point of view, context, audience, or purpose of this document. So one thing that you could put was the purpose. The purpose is usually the easiest one to do, but because it's an art piece, I guess point of view would be easier. Let's see if I could type it in. Artist says that Powderly didn't support all workers, only those that were Knights of Labor. So that could be the point of view of the artist. Now, the support that you could put on here is the scab worker is pushed aside. The scab worker is pushed aside as he is seen as a threat. But the failure of the Knights of Labor led to the success of the AFL, or American Federation of Labor. So we're not sure we're going to use this one, but let's move on to the other documents. Document 2. Now, this is a transcript from the Haymarket trial. Defense attorney William Foster, in his closing argument, is stating, if these men are to be tried for advocating doctrines opposed to our ideas of propriety, there's no use for me here. Let the sheriff go and erect a scaffold. Let him bring 8 ropes with dangling nooses at the end. Let him pass them around the necks of these 8 men, and let us stop this farce. So what he is saying here is, in his closing argument, the jury's already decided that these 8 anarchists that were blamed for the Haymarket bombing are guilty. And he's saying this whole trial is a farce. It's fake. Just let the judge hurry up and do what he needs to do. So this document is significant because it's going to showcase how America feels. Now, this also kind of goes to a future event with Sacco and Vanzetti. So here, defense attorney is calling the trial a farce. There we go. Point of view, context, audience, or purpose. We can put on here that those executed, I'm so sorry, it's almost 11, I'm sorry. Those executed for their crimes were more than likely innocent. But this, of course, would be the point of view. Now, what argument can be based, or what argument could this document be used to support? You could probably make reference to the Pullman or the Homestead strike, because they were both dealing with violence. Okay, man, that was brutal. Okay, let's see, document 3. The trade unions are the legitimate outgrowth of modern society and industrial conditions. Notice that this document is written by Samuel Gompers, rhymes with Chompers. He is the leader of the American Federation of Labor. They were born of the necessity of workers to protect and defend themselves from encroachment, injustice, and wrong, to protect the workers in their inalienable rights to a higher and better life. So this document is a really, really strong document. This is describing support for labor unions in America. The belief of Samuel Gompers was a defense of the rights of all workers. Remember, he only allowed skilled workers and then no people of color and no women. But because of that, a lot of people are going to respect him. So he is going to, I should have put a defense to the rights of all workers, reaching out to all. Now this could be used, we'll get back to this one. I want to get through the documents first. Ooh, y'all remember this one. This one is by Joseph Ferdinand Kepler, The Bosses of the Senate. So the main idea of this one from Puck Magazine shows who's the real boss in America. Is it actually the senators, or is it the fat cat monopolists such as steel, copper, Standard Oil, iron, paper, sugar, coal? I can't read those other ones. So in document 4, monopolizers are overlooking the Senate floor. Okay, now the point of view of this document, Puck is clearly showing that the author wanted Americans to know who really had all the power. So the point of view is, author wanted us to know who really had all the power in America. Obviously, not Congress. It was the monopolizers. Now, an argument that can be used to support this is, okay, we're going to get back to that after we do the thesis. All right, the last one is document 5. Now, this is the New York Times account of the Ludlow massacre. The Ludlow camp is a mass of charred debris. Buried beneath it is a story of horror unparalleled in the history of industrial warfare. In the holes which had been dug for their protection against the rifle's fire, the women and children died like trapped rats where the flames swept over them. One pit uncovered disclosed the bodies of 10 children and 2 women. Now, what's going to happen here, the Ludlow massacre was violence that was used to put down one of these strikes. So if you recall from chapter 16 through 18, Pinkerton soldiers and other private security agencies were used to put down rebellions, strikes, and whatnot. And violence occurred, just like the Homestead strike, the Haymarket strike. So Upton Sinclair, the one who wrote The Jungle in 1906, is going to write an open letter to Rockefeller, who owned the plant. I intend to indict you for murder before the people of this country. The charges will be pressed, and I think the verdict will be guilty. I cannot believe that a man who dares to lead a service in a Christian church can be cognizant and therefore guilty of the crimes that have been committed. So he is playing on his Christianity. If you recall, Rockefeller was a very devout Christian, cared about women and children and the masses, was a huge philanthropist. But how can you be a devout Christian and then look away when women and children are killed? So this is going to be significant. So here, Upton Sinclair wrote a letter criticizing Rockefeller. Okay, so what did Upton Sinclair believe? Sinclair believed a true Christian like Rockefeller would not turn a blind eye to violence and death. The argument here could be made that true Christians like Rockefeller, it's kind of repetitive, but you know what? It's almost midnight. True Christians like Rockefeller should not be prone to violence, such as seen at the. Okay, so after you go through the documents, quickly note 1 to 2 pieces of outside evidence you could use. So nothing that was in the documents can be used. So we can probably put something like the Sherman Antitrust Act. And we could probably put something like, let me see, I'm trying to think of stuff that was not on there. Let's say the Homestead strike. That'll work. So what would be some good ideas for contextualization? Now, the first thing that I think you should do is if we're talking about late 1890s, 1900, you can't talk about Civil War, but you can talk about the Second Industrial Revolution. So the Second Industrial Revolution began leading America to riches and another word, power, I guess. I was wondering how big that would get. Abundance of natural resources, labor, and technology transformed America. So this is what's going to be in your contextualization part of the essay. So this is the hard part. Now the general argument, oh yes, I did put boxes, okay. The general argument is going to be simple. Now either you're going to say there was a lot of support or there wasn't. Now the best thing that I could think of is there was not a lot of support. So you know what, let me go down to the thesis statement. Something along the lines of, although workers tried to get support, you know what, maybe this could be, although labor unions tried to get support for their workers, they were held back by, we could put, lack of government support, financial power of the, I'll put robber barons instead of monopolizers, and for the bad public image the labor unions displayed. Remember, the Knights of Labor completely destroyed after the Haymarket riot. So if that is your thesis statement, that means that's the 3 things you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about they were held back because there was no government support. the robber barons were too wealthy, and bad public image. So body paragraph 1 can talk about how the labor unions did their best, but were faced with no support from the government. You could put something on here, of course, like laissez-faire or whatever. Oh, I put it in the wrong place, didn't I? Now, the documents that you could use, you could probably use document 1. And let me look through the printout I have here. Document 3 would work well. Document 1, you could use point of view for this one. Document 1, I believe we said Terence Powderly only helped those in his organization. In document 3, you can put Samuel Gompers, rhymes with chompers, helped all of those working, belonging to a union. I don't know, it sounded better in my head. Outside evidence to support this, we'll get to that in a bit. Now, body paragraph 2, you could write about the robber barons. Robber barons' wealth made it impossible for labor unions to succeed. So you could use the document that, let me see, what did I write down? Document 5. Document 5 shows that robber barons held the true power in Congress and were able to manipulate Congress. Oh, actually, that's document 4. Document 5, go back. Yeah, document 5. Robber barons often used violence to get their way, and the government turned a blind eye. You know what? I'm mixing and matching, and you know what? I don't care. Anyway, so we'll probably, instead of point of view here, we could probably use 1 and 3. I'm going to leave it blank. Outside evidence to support this, I want to say Carnegie's homestead strike was not listed on here. Outside evidence here, you could put the Interstate Commerce Act, Sherman Antitrust Act, could be on there. Okay, so I filled most of this out, which is awesome considering this is the first one I've attempted. But I just want to go ahead and go to the good parts. I went ahead and worked with another teacher to type out the perfect response, and it is color-coded. So if you scroll down, the context in the opening paragraph is in blue, as you can see here. The thesis statement that we worked on is in red. HIP is in green. Outside evidence is orange. The use of document to support the argument, going back to the thesis, is purple. And then this weird color over here, it's use of the document, but not to support the argument, okay? Now, I really don't want to read it all, so I'm only going to read the first couple of paragraphs. So the context. The Second Industrial Revolution began in the United States shortly after the end of the Civil War. Coming out of the carnage of war, the country was looking to put itself back together. Advancements in technology, such as railroads, communications, steel, oil, and others, would help push the United States to become one of the world's economic powerhouses. The abundance of natural resources, such as iron, crude oil, and land, would provide the foundation for economic growth. Immigration into the U.S. would feed the factories as hundreds of thousands came in search of a new life. These, combined with the entrepreneurial drive of men such as Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and Rockefeller, created businesses and monopolies of which the world had never seen. Now, I always tell y'all the context has to be at least 4 sentences, and it has to have It has to be valid. It has to have information, vocabulary terms. There's tons of them in here. And again, it cannot be more than 20 years before. Now, the section in the middle is filler. The rapid growth would have its negative effects as well. What rights did these new workers have? Should there be governmental controls? As friction increased between workers and management, workers began to organize and form labor unions to press for their own rights. Here is your thesis statement. During the late 19th and early 20th century, American workers tried to gain support for workers' rights and did make some headway in the right to organize, but were thwarted by lack of governmental support, the financial might of the robber barons, and a poor public image. So you know, you're going to talk about lack of government support, you're going to talk about financial might of the robber barons, and poor public image. So in this paragraph, I'm just going to go over one so you can see how to use a document. So again, the stuff in black is just, I don't want to say filler, but it's filler. Beginning with the Knights of Labor, the American workers tried to fight back and obtain some sort of equality with the owners of business. Now here's outside information. Hours were long, pay was meager, and the working conditions often treacherous. One of the first labor unions was the Knights of Labor. Now, the Knights of Labor is referenced in document 1. So in parentheses, once you mention the document, you put document 1. The Knights allowed both skilled and unskilled labor to join their ranks. This would end up being part of their undoing, as unskilled labor is easily replaceable, which is true. The Putt cartoon shows the leader of the Knights trying to keep the peace between a worker and the business owner. However, in this case, the worker is a scab, not a true labor union member. The creator of this piece was trying to imply that Powderly didn't actually support all workers, just those who were union members or members of the Knights of Labor. So that is your analysis. The creator of the piece was trying to imply. That is point of view. Now, in order to support the document further and get the other point, continue. The scab worker was pushed aside as a threat to the effectiveness of the union. Although the Knights didn't last, they laid much of the groundwork for later unions to succeed. One of these unions was the AFL, or the American Federation of Labor. More outside info. The AFL would gain strength in the later part of the 19th and early 20th century. Unlike the Knights, they only allowed skilled labor, which they would separate into the type of work they did: masons, carpenters, etc. The leader of the AFL was a dynamic supporter of workers' rights and capitalism, Samuel Gompers, rhymes with chompers. Now, this outside information is in the documents. It's document 3. Because you mentioned information from the document, you would simply put document 3. The HIP analysis. Gompers' speech was a classic defense of the rights of all workers. Gompers was reaching out to anyone who was sympathetic to the cause of justice and equality. Now, this is supporting the thesis. These notes struck a chord as the AFL would become America's largest labor union, and by the start of World War I, and have over 2 million members. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of this, but if you continue through the document, you'll see the filler, you'll see outside evidence in orange, you'll see the document to support your argument in purple, outside information, argument, HIP, support, filler, support, outside info. And then the last paragraph. As time moved on into the 20th century, labor unions made great strides. Many of the public opinion issues were resolved and labor unions would become the norm. Even today, though, the rights of workers in business are still at odds. Some states have strong labor unions, while other states have right to work laws, taking some of the power away from the unions. This is the unicorn point. This tug of war has deep political roots, as American unions tend to be more liberal and support politicians of the Democratic Party. Millions of dollars are spent by the unions on political campaigns, and the 2020 election stands to have record amounts donated by unions to defeat President Trump. Although labor unions now have the money to fight back, the battle between labor and management still rages on. So this is comparing it to a different time period. All of this right here. And that is where you get your complexity point. We're not focusing on that yet. So go back and read all of this goodies so you can have a better understanding. And I'm sorry that I'm struggling with this. It's the only time I have silence in my house. So if there's any other questions, of course, you could ask me on Remind, on Edmodo, though I rarely check that. You could email it to me, whatever. If you're a WHAP genius and you already know how to write DBQs, Obviously, this video isn't for you, but this is for those that want a better understanding or enrichment. And the next time I do one of these, I will make sure it's not 11:17 p.m. Okay, thank you.